listeners will relate to this. There's something in your DNA that is all about the train.
Yeah, I was born in the UK, and we spent a lot of time in London, and my other half of the family are in Glasgow, and, I have vivid memories of being on the sleeper train with my mum and my brother. My dad was in the Navy, so he was away a lot, and just, mum and my brother would be asleep in the sleeper train, and I would just be, at night, mesmerised, looking out the window of the train, just the whole motion of it, the sound of it, and even when I used to go out for walks in Mortlake with my grandmother, we used to walk along the Thames, and I was just fascinated by the rails on the docks, and when I started school in the UK, the main trunk railway line ran across the back of the school field, so while other kids were out playing, I was standing there, watching the trains go past.
You're almost in tears.
Oh, I know, you almost made me tear up there. It's so romantic. I love trains. But also, Jared, do you find that there's a thing that happens as soon as you sit down on a train, you look out the window, that you get a sense of calm and satisfaction with the world?
I think so, yeah. Rail travel in general is a great way to travel, It's a place where you can be in your own space, you can look out the window and just take everything in. It's an amazing thing, and I'm a real advocate for rail in general, and with my local government work that I do on the community board, that's something we're really pushing to try and get for the cruise ships that come into Port Chalmers and into Dunedin. We've had major issues with the buses, so we have Dunedin railways, and that's something that I've been pushing for as well. But yes, it is a feeling.
Nice one. Jared Holton there, train enthusiast. Thank you very much. By the way, that poll, to repeat, some of you wanted to know, 58% of panellists say New Zealand is moving in the wrong direction. 42% of you said New Zealand is heading in the right direction. So, in the wrong more than in the right. Verity Johnson, Peter Dunn, wonderful to have you both on. Wallace Chapman.
Thank you.
Checkpoint with Lisa Owen is next.
Kei te whakarongo mai koe ki te reo irirangi o Aotearoa. This is Checkpoint on RNZ National. I'm Lisa Owen. Haere ake nei, a whole lot of huffing and puffing over a new vape store that's opened opposite a West Auckland school just in time to avoid a law change that would see it banned. The principal joins us live, and we talk to the store owner who says he's made changes to ease community concerns. What happens when your flat fails the Healthy Homes test and you're locked into a lease? It's called a Land Cruiser, but there was no land in sight when a bunch of Aussie car buffs took theirs on a record-busting ocean floor run. Why? Well, we will ask that. And a farmer celebrates his 50th wedding anniversary by gifting his wife a bouquet of 1.2 million sunflowers. Yep, 1.2 million.
RNZ News at 5 o'clock. Good evening, I'm Anna Thomas. Heavy rain, snow and severe gales are battering many parts of the country. Winds gusting up to 130 kilometres an hour have downed power lines, cancelled flights in Queenstown and lifted the roof off a building at the Taieri Aerodrome. Power was cut earlier to hundreds of homes and businesses. Met Service has issued orange strong wind warnings for Wairarapa, Wellington, Marlborough, Canterbury High Country and the lower South Island. And a heavy rain watch is in place for Canterbury and Otago headwaters and Westland ranges. Motorists heading to the FIFA Women's World Cup game in Dunedin tonight are being told that driving conditions could be hazardous. National MP Tim van der Molen has been referred to Parliament's Powerful Privileges Committee following a complaint about his behaviour towards another MP. RNZ understands Mr van der Molen is accused of standing over Labour's Shannon Halbert, prompting other MPs to surround Mr Halbert out of concern for his safety. Here's our political reporter Katie Scotcher.
Parliament Speaker Adrian Rudafes says he received a letter flagging Mr van der Molen's behaviour towards Mr Halbert at the end of a select committee meeting in June. Mr Rudafes says if the allegations are proven to be true, Mr van der Molen's conduct could amount to threatening or intimidating an MP in the discharge of their duty. He says there are differing accounts of what happened.
The Crown's clinical witness in the Lauren Dickerson murder trial admits that he overlooked adding the mother's thoughts of harming the children in his report. Mrs Dickerson has pleaded not guilty to murdering her 3 young daughters, with her defence arguing insanity and infanticide. During cross-examination in the High Court in Christchurch, defence lawyer Anne Tui asked forensic psychiatrist Eric Monasterio about previous thoughts Mrs Dickerson had of harming her children.
You didn't discuss it with her, did you?
No, I wouldn't have. That's not in my report. I wouldn't have discussed that with her, no.
You wouldn't have discussed it with her?
If it isn't in my report here, I would not have discussed it with her.
Okay. But you accept that you should have?
Yes, I should have.
Dr Monasterio told the court earlier that there is no evidence of insanity or infanticide as a defence. Te Pūkenga lost more than $80 million last year, but says the result could have been worse if it wasn't for the sector's merger. It's the first result, including the polytechnics and industry training organisations Te Pūkenga took over. Our education correspondent John Gerritsen reports.
The 2022 annual report shows Te Pūkenga's work-based learning division made a profit of more than $57 million last year, but its polytechnics lost more than that, leaving it with a deficit of just over $80 million. It says the result was worse than expected, but a lot lower than the $280 million it says polytechnics would have lost without being merged into the new organisation. Auditors gave a qualified opinion for part of the results, saying there was not enough evidence about some areas of cash flow. The Institute says it will make another deficit this year.
A health and safety expert has told the District Court in Auckland the danger of taking a tour on Whakaari White Island was second only to climbing Mount Cook. It's the 4th week of the trial into health and safety failings in the lead up to the deadly eruption in 2019 that killed 22 people. WorkSafe alleges the island's owners put profit ahead of safety. Richard Gibson said tours on Whakaari were often too risky to be commercially viable.
This is obviously a very high-risk activity. It's miles above everything apart from climbing Mount Cook, which is a very specialised task.
Richard Gibson said the trips should have been halted when volcanic activity picked up. The owners deny the charges. A stray pig that caused a backlog of traffic on a busy Auckland motorway earlier today has escaped capture again. The pig has been making guest appearances near the northwestern motorway over the past 2 weeks. This morning it was spotted sunbathing at the side of the road near the Te Atatu Road off-ramp, but took off into the bush. Waka Kotahi says it's been working with police and the council to capture the animal, but even traps set up next to the motorway have failed. To sport now, and several All Blacks will play their final test in New Zealand at Saturday's second Bledisloe Cup test in Dunedin. The All Blacks have already retained the Bledisloe Cup with their convincing win in Melbourne at the weekend. 10 of the current squad are leaving New Zealand after the World Cup, and forwards coach Jason Ryan says the departing players will be acknowledged, making it a special game.
There's always emotion every week in a test week. Guys get to represent their country, so it's important, but I think this one, just being down in Dunedin, I think the first Bledisloe was played there many years ago, so I think that we want to get down there and have a really good performance.
England cricket captain Ben Stokes says he drew on his natural optimism and experience to help cope with the mental pressure of guiding England to a 2-all Ashes series draw. England secured a dramatic 49-run win in the final test at the Oval, bagging 7 wickets late on the final day to deprive the visitors of their first Ashes series win in England since 2001.
2-2 at the end of a series like this, I think, is a fair reflection. Australia, World Test champions, absolute quality team. Being 2-0 down after the first 2 games, I don't think many teams would have been able to respond in the manner in which we did. Just standing here, pretty content about everything that we've achieved over the last 7 weeks.
In the USA, the Netherlands and England just need a point from their respective games tonight to make sure of their places in the round of 16 at the FIFA World Cup. The USA play Portugal, the Netherlands play Vietnam, and England play China. And that's the news. Worries about whether Wellington will ever get moving.
Discussions around an extra tunnel, discussions around how we deal with the basin reserves. These things need to get a bit more momentum behind them.
Unease among 5 Hawke's Bay councils about house buyouts.
If one come back and say, hey, we're not happy about this, then that's going to make it really difficult on the ones that are pretty happy with it.
And the Silver Ferns coach has this to say about South African coach Norma Plummer.
She scares the shit out of me.
News you can swear by. Morning Report, weekdays from 6 on RNZ National.
Another short forecast from Met Service until midnight tomorrow. Warnings and watches are enforced for severe gales, heavy rain and snow. Northland to Wellington, also Coromandel Peninsula, Bay of Plenty in the central high country. Showers, some heavy tomorrow with possible thunderstorms and hail, and snow lowering to 700 metres. Gisborne, Hawke's Bay and Wairirapa are mainly fine with showers spreading north tomorrow, some heavy with possible thunderstorms near the coast. Nelson, Marlborough and Canterbury fine at first, a period of rain spreading north today. Isolated showers tomorrow with snow to 500 metres for a time. Buller and Westland, rain, heavy at times with possible thunderstorms and snow to 700 metres, clearing tomorrow. Otago, Southland and Fiordland, showers, heavy and possibly thundery at times with snow lowering to about 200 metres overnight. And for the Chatham Islands, fine spells today. Showers tomorrow, some heavy and possibly thundery. RNZ National, it is 5:07 and you're with Checkpoint and Lisa Owen.
Nā mihi ana, tēnā koutou katoa, no mai haere mai, ki Checkpoint e tēnei rā, ko Lisa Owen tēnei. A school community has protested this afternoon against a new vape shop setting up near the school gate. The shop is opposite Parakai School near Helensville in West Auckland. New rules come into force for the sale of vapes today. Disposable vapes are now banned and new shops soon won't be able to open within 300 metres of schools. But existing ones can remain and some have got in with a licence before the rules changed. Now the government's being urged to tighten the laws further. Our reporter Jordan Dunn and cameraman Nick Monroe have the story.
A school community concerned and pushing back. Worried about how close a new vape shop is from their local primary school.
My son, well, I got 2 and they walk to school every morning and evening, and they're already having troubles with being peered into vaping at school, let alone having it advertised in their face every morning and evening. So I'm just here as a member of the community, as a parent, just to protest against it.
Everyone's got their own choice. It's, adults can choose to have a smoke, but just the location of it, right next to where we wait for our kids, it's just too much, it's too close.
The shop is setting up effectively on the doorstep of Parakai School, which is a primary school for children up to year 8 or 12 years old. New rules for vape shops come into effect today, banning disposable vapes which are popular for young people. New shops will also be unable to open within 300 metres of schools and marae. But some, like the one here in Parakai, have already been given the go-ahead to open. Tammy Downer is on the school board and organised today's protest and says the proximity of the store is worrying.
We know that those flavours, bubblegums and candy canes, are appealing to children, potentially designed to, and that's what influences them starting it. And we have lots of challenges with vaping in our school and in the community already, and this can only make it worse.
She says younger generations are especially vulnerable to the harms of vaping.
I've learned so much over this last week around the impact of vaping on a developing child's brain. So their brains are developing until they're 25. But vaping and the nicotine that comes along with it is way more sensitive to their brains than even in adults. And the nicotine impacts how their brain's developing basically, and impacts things like learning, their attention, their memory, all of those things which are affecting how they're able to learn at school.
It's not just Parakai. Vape shops close to schools is a problem for lots of communities. We take a drive to Otahu. Some retailers have been taking advantage of the period before the new rules come into place today. Under the new rules, this value vapor would not be legal because it sits 300 metres from Otahu Primary School. But since it's already here, it's here to stay. And this will apply to 4 other stores in the immediate vicinity of the exact same school. Allowing them to stay has been the catalyst for vape-free kids taking action. The organisation says dairies and supermarkets should also be banned from selling vapes right next to schools. Locals in Otahu agree vapes are simply too easy to come by.
It's influenced young children, man. Like, I've seen a lot of young children, like, they're getting to the point like they're paying adults, you know, to buy it for them, to use their ID to buy it for them. Because there's too many vape shops around, man. Like, at least once, bro, there's about, on this street here alone, there's about 4 or 5 different vape shops.
Oh, man, that's bollocks. Yeah. Vaping at all, I don't agree 100%, eh? It's just, I'd rather smoke than vape, to be honest. It's ruined the community, busting the young ones as well. Like, you got like 12-year-olds now, I see it around here in Otahu and Papatoa and out in Manukau, vaping. So, yeah, I think vaping just cut it.
Peer pressure. That's what you get some smoke. It's like drinking back in the old days. You come and have a beer, mate, sort of thing. But now it's come and have a vape, mate. That's the way it works now.
Yeah, I do, yeah. But then so I was smoking. So I was, smoking cigarettes, weed, It's going to be an issue anyway.
Vape Free Kids New Zealand will present petitions to Parliament in the next few weeks, calling for loopholes to be closed and laws be tightened around the selling of vapes. It hopes that will eventually stop the selling of vapes around schools like this one.
And joining us now is Parakai School Principal Yolanda Koromansky. Kia ora, Yolanda.
Kia ora. Hi, Annabelle.
It's Lisa you're actually speaking to.
Hi, Lisa. Thank you.
No problem. The store you have that has set up across the road from the school, it's not breaking the law. It's got in time to get a licence. What do you think of that?
If I could peel back a bit, we actually had a meeting with the store owner and the landlord and said to them and asked them, how do you feel sneaking in just before the law comes into place and making sure that you gap in so that you can open a store where our children stand outside your store to cross the road. So I feel pretty disappointed morally that, you have people who are prepared to sneak in and know what it's doing to our children and go ahead with it.
So what's your concern? What do you think will happen as a result of this store being where it is?
Well, there's multiple things that can happen. We had an interesting conversation today with the landlord and the store owner, and we asked them, have you done any research? Do you actually know anything about it? And the answer was no. They actually didn't know anything about it. And we said to them, as grandparents, when you sit and watch TV tonight and, we're going to share some research with you if you'd like to look, how would you feel talking to your grandchildren and saying, we own those stores? So a couple of things could happen. One, it just goes on. Store opens. There's nothing we can do about it. But we think that our community, is really strong in this and hoping that they won't support it. But we're actually hoping that the government would step up and, they will do something to stop these stores being so close to our school. They are on our doorstep.
How far would you estimate from your door?
Well, the minute the children step out of the pathway, the first step that they put their foot on is the concrete path for the shop. So I would say a couple of steps away.
Okay.
Literally.
I know you've mentioned there that you spoke to the store owner. We've talked to the store owner as well. And he says as a consequence of the conversation he's had with you, he's going to change the name of the store to take the word vape out of it. And he says there is film that has been put on the windows, a frosting, which prevents kids from looking in. Does that go far enough to address your concerns?
Oh, honestly, it doesn't go far enough at all. Changing the times that you are open, the frosting that you have, the children have no other way, for half the school, they come into the school, but to pass the store. So all of that is actually making no difference at all.
Are you seeing kids at your school using vapes?
Pardon me?
Are you seeing children at your school using vapes?
Sadly, yes. And I must say that it is increasing within our school and across New Zealand. The difficulty with this store opening is that he does own a store 2 doors away. That's a liquor store, and he sells vapes in it. But actually owning a vape store is a point of difference. Now he's allowed to sell the bubble gum and the candy flavors that goes with it. These marketing ploys are designed particularly to attract younger buyers. I think it'd be pretty silly if you have a 50-year-old rocking in and asking for the bubblegum flavour.
So when you talk about the kids at your school, Yolanda, that are using vapes, what kind of age are you talking about? What's the youngest you've seen in a child?
Sadly, the youngest child that has brought it has been a year 4 child. A year 5 child. And we know that it's available, but the impact that it has on the growing brain, which we know the brain grows until you're about 25, is alarming. It's just not good enough.
So that's what, 8 or 9 years old?
9 years old. I mean, you having 9-year-old children, if they get hooked on it, the nicotine is the killer in it. And having children, you know, talking to other schools around us and local colleges and, you know, throughout the country, imagine a child needing to excuse himself from the room because they need a nicotine kick. You know, the research behind it is so worrying that it's time that we pay attention, and really sadly it's the government that allowed this to happen. So Yolanda, obviously there are rule changes that are coming. Some have come in today, some are coming into force over the next couple of months. You obviously don't think they go far enough. So should vape stores be completely prohibited from selling product within 300 metres of a school, whether or not they are new stores or existing stores? I totally agree. I think it should be totally not allowed. It's just wrong. Really appreciate your time. Thank you for joining us. That's Yolanda Koromansky, who is the Parakai school principal there, talking about the vape store that's set up just across the road. It is 18 minutes after 5. Kia mau tonu mai. Do stay with us. You're listening to Checkpoint on RNZ National. An Auckland renter is calling for more accountability for property managers after discovering her flat failed the government's healthy homes standards. When Sarah Yates moved into the Mount Eden flat, she found it was damp, drafty and covered in mould. Clearly in breach of the standards. Now she wants to see more compliance from landlords as she takes her owner to the Tenancy Tribunal. Finn Blackwell has the story.
From the outside, it's a gorgeous retro villa in the middle of Mount Eden. But inside, the paint's peeling from the ceiling, the windows are leaking, there's no extractor fan in the bathroom.
They could potentially install one that goes out there, but they haven't. So we just don't use this space.
And there's mould. Lots of mould. Tenant Sarah Yates lifts up a corner of carpet, revealing a large black patch of the stuff.
But there's mould all under this. And that's the main door to the third bedroom.
It's so bad, she became worried about what it would do to her health, so decided not to move in, even though she's still paying for her room. That means she has to pay 2 lots of rent, totalling $300 a week. Her 2 flatmates aren't so lucky.
The others, they had to move in because they couldn't pay double rent. I just feel like it would be great if they could be accountable and actually delivered what they said they were going to deliver, which is a healthy home.
When she signed the lease, Sarah was told the house was up to healthy home standards, but she soon noticed the extent of the disrepair. There are gaps around the doors, which she says breaches the requirements around drafts. The missing extractor fans in the bathrooms also mean the property doesn't comply. To make matters worse, she says the heater in the main living room doesn't work properly. Sarah has independently commissioned a Healthy Homes report and has had verbal confirmation that the property doesn't meet Healthy Homes standards, but says the property managers have done little to address the issues.
They clearly don't really care, or they know that they're not going to get in that much trouble. I don't know. I'm still not even sure when we go to the Tenancy Tribunal how much trouble they're going to get in.
She's lodged a complaint with the Tenancy Tribunal and wants to see greater accountability for property managers.
Even these really basic healthy homes standards haven't been met. I've got evidence in front of me showing that it hasn't been met, but there's been no accountability on the real estate agent to deliver even these really basic standards. So I think it does need to improve.
Auckland Central MP Chloe Schwarbrick agrees, saying the country's rentals are in a dire state.
It's abysmal. It is absolutely shocking, the standards that we expect or allow, the kind of 1.5 million New Zealanders in this country to rent to live in.
She wants to establish rental warrants of fitness with an increased threshold for compliance.
The government would have a handle of just how many of these companies are out there, but also ensure that there were universal high standards that were applied. And then, of course, that there would be a certification process of all homes meeting the healthy home standards and any other kind of standards that we decided to apply through the regs.
And the issue isn't isolated to Auckland. Renters United President Geordie Rogers says he's heard stories like Sarah's from all over the country.
We certainly continue to hear stories of people who are told that their home is Healthy Homes compliant, either for them to find out that it's not compliant or for eventually it to deteriorate and get to a state where the landlord's no longer keeping it compliant.
And he says landlords need to know they can't just turn a blind eye.
If the landlord has to go in and inspect the home, either makes a false declaration about the condition of the home or doesn't maintain it, it's not actually the home passively making that renter sick. That's an active decision that that landlord has chosen to make.
The manager of Sarah's Mount Eden property, Ray White, told RNZ they were unable to comment because of the impending tenancy tribunal hearing.
And it is 22 minutes after 5. You're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. Homai or whakaaro, we love your feedback on anything you've heard on the program this evening. Do get in touch. Let us know your thoughts on vape stores near Helensville. One is just set up opposite a school. Should they be allowed to do that? Existing ones stay in business. The rules are about to change. Also, interested in your thoughts on healthy homes. Does your flat comply, and what are you doing about it? 2101 on text. Tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ. The email address is checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. Let's go to the headlines now with Anna. Anna, mina pita kōrero.
Thank you, Lisa. Let's have a look at the headlines. In fact, West Auckland Primary School principal hopes the government will step in over vape shops after one opened opposite her school ahead of rule changes that will ban them from being within 300 metres of the gates. Parakai School near Helensville. Principal Yolanda Koromansky told Checkpoint she was pretty disappointed morally that people would sneak in like that. She said she's seen children as young as 9 vaping. Met Services issued orange strong wind warnings for Wairarapa, Wellington, Marlborough, Canterbury, High Country and the Lower South Island. Canterbury and Otago headwaters and Western Ranges are under a heavy rain watch, while the Lower South Island is being warned of heavy snow overnight. National MP Tim van der Molen has been referred to Parliament's Privileges Committee after a complaint about his behaviour towards Labour's Shannon Halbert. Parliament Speaker Adrian Ruafe says he received a letter flagging Mr van der Molen's conduct at the end of a select committee meeting in June. The Lauren Dickinson murder trial has heard the Crown's clinical witness was told she had thoughts of harming her 3 daughters, but did not discuss them with her and didn't add them to his report. Mrs Dickinson has pleaded not guilty to murdering the children. And a stray pig that's been on the run in Auckland for 2 weeks is still living high on the hog. The pig was spotted in bush near the Northwestern Motorway's Te Atatu Road off-ramp this morning, but efforts to recapture it didn't bring home the bacon. I'm really sorry about that.
I see what you did there.
We've got a little bit of traffic news around the country. Firstly, in Auckland, a crash with power lines on Massey Road between Frisian Drive and Imrie Ave, and Mangere is now closed. Avoid the area or expect delays with diversions in place affecting all traffic, including bus services. In the south, vehicle restrictions have now been lifted on State Highway 8, the Lindis Pass, but extra care should still be taken due to snow and ice conditions. And of course, State Highway 94, the Milford Road remains closed because of snow. Those are the headlines, Lisa.
Kia ora rā iho. New Zealand are out of the FIFA Women's World Cup, but there is still plenty of football to be played both here and Australia. The group games are wrapping up over the next couple of days with the knockout stages of the tournament starting on Saturday for the final 16 teams. New Zealand football fans, new and old, now need to find a second team to support at the World Cup. We're joined by sports reporter Felicity Reid. OK, so we can't barrack for the football ferns anymore. Who should we be getting behind instead?
Well, your criteria for selecting your second team might go on recent form. You might jump on board with the favourites. You might prefer to back the underdogs, or you might just have to settle on that office sweepstake team that you got as well. Mm-hmm. But this search has actually gone straight to the top of the politics. Prime Minister Chris Hipkins was asked whether New Zealand should actually be backing Australia now because our co-hosts are still in the tournament. The Matildas put 4 goals past Canada last night, so that keeps them around for the round of 16, which is great news for Australia, the country, and also great news for the tournament organisers. So Chris Hipkins realises this is a little bit controversial to be suggesting that we should be backing Australia, and especially as that anyone but Australia has been that Kiwi mantra for such a long time.
Go the Matildas, but I'd support. Well, yeah, look, I don't know. There's something in it, isn't there, about Kiwis just backing an Australian team? But of course, we wish our Aussie mates the best.
So Sports Minister Grant Robertson was also a little bit hesitant to be throwing everything in behind Australia in a tournament like this, but he did reckon that the Matildas would be around at the business end of the competition. National leader Christopher Luxon wouldn't be supporting Australia, he'd said. And so you could do, I would say, a little bit worse than supporting the Matildas. They haven't seen their captain and striker. She hasn't been on the field. Sam Kerr, she's regarded as one of the best forwards in the world, so she's probably still hanging around. I'd say that perhaps Australia have got their best to come yet, but I also just have to have a little bit of a disclaimer. Actually, I got Australia in our office sweepstake.
Oh, okay, because I was giving you the hairy eyeball anyway, because I think Australia, they're like frenemies, right? So, no, and I reckon because Kiwis have so many connections to other countries, they've probably got a fallback team already,
exactly.
Because of their international connections. I'm a no when it comes to supporting Australia. Go the Netherlands. Okay, the Silver Ferns shooting circle, well, it's had a bit of a shake-up at the Netball World Cup, not for good reasons, eh?
No, so shooter Maya Wilson, she'll actually be getting quite a few more minutes during this World Cup in South Africa after shooter Grace Wicke went down with a knee injury yesterday. And so there's a little bit of concern around what would happen for New Zealand in this circumstance. But Maya Wilson's been around for a long time. She's had success for New Zealand before. And she knew that she got this court time. And that was just after this information about Grace Wicke got actually made public. So Wilson said she wasn't feeling the extra pressure in the absence of Wicke.
Yeah, I'm definitely prepared. I love the golf shoot bib. I know what I can do, and I've been able to test myself against the likes of Australia and England and Jamaica before and feel like I've been able to come out on top. So it's nothing more or less that I prepare for. It's the exact same way, and I'm just looking forward to what that comes.
And I actually spoke to Maya Wilson. She plays for the Stars in the ANZ Premiership, and I spoke to her during the ANZ Premiership season, and she had hoped to get some game time at goal shoot and goal attack in order to show a little bit of versatility for this tournament, because I think she knew that she couldn't dislodge Grace Wicke in order to get this game time. She doesn't need to now, but she does need to step up and shine.
Okay, Felicity, I'm just going back to the football again because that's where my head is at. I'm interested. 2101 on text. Let us know what team you were supporting because the footy ferns aren't there now. So what team and why are you getting behind, Australia or nah to Australia? And we can give some feedback to Felicity on that one. 2101 on text, or you can tweet us at checkpointrnz. The clouds of confusion over the government's plans for big transport projects in 2 of New Zealand's major cities lifted slightly at Parliament today. Labor and National are under pressure to clearly spell out their intentions and how they plan to pay for it all. The government says it wants to let's get Wellington actually moving, which would require a sharper focus than what's happening now. National, meanwhile, faces more fiscal hole accusations, which it's dismissing as a political hit job. Here's our political editor, Jane Patterson.
The latest news release from Let's Get Wellington Moving, an explanation of how planning is progress, sums up the frustrations around the project that's dragged on for 8 years.
I think we need to change the program to make it move more swiftly and get more progress.
MP for Wellington Central and Finance Minister Grant Robertson says there's no plan to remove any significant parts of the wider project.
Public transport, mass rapid transit and the changes to our roading network need to be part of the future Wellington transport plans.
Senior Labour MPs were being asked about Let's Get Wellington Moving after vague comments from ministers threw up further questions about its future. The multi-billion-dollar Auckland light rail project is another that's been years in the planning, an election promise from then leader Jacinda Ardern in 2017.
Is Auckland light rail going to be a failed election promise from Labour?
No.
But Prime Minister Chris Hipkins wasn't willing to commit past the business case that's still a work in progress.
The whole point of doing a business case is that you actually get the business case before you make a decision on it. I'm not going to make a decision on a business case that we haven't seen yet.
National would scrap both Let's Get Wellington Moving and Auckland light rail, promising instead a suite of new roads roads and a rapid transit network for Auckland.
Pretty transformative plan to announce how we intend to build a much stronger and more modern and reliable infrastructure and roading network here in New Zealand.
But the plan's under scrutiny from Labour with the familiar question, how will it be funded?
In their plan, they've got $10 billion that they seem to think is coming from nowhere. They don't seem to be able to explain where it's coming from.
Mr Luxon jumping the gun while defending his numbers.
We have been a very transparent government laying out a vision of projects over the next 10 years. We've costed them to the very best of our ability using publicly available information.
He says there are trillions of dollars of sovereign wealth around the world, with investors looking for long-term infrastructure investments. The opportunity would be open to all, including countries like China, as long as it's signed off by the new agency National would create.
The National Infrastructure Agency will build the expertise to be able to work out who's the right partner for the right project.
The debate then moved to the chamber.
Why is it that whether it's tax or transport or frankly any other issue, he can tell the country what he won't do, but he can't tell the country what he will do?
On this side of the House, we do focus, however, on making sure that the announcements that we make actually have money behind them, something the National Party still don't seem to be able to do.
One election policy plan the government refuses to deny, removing GST off fresh fruit and vegetables. The opposition using question time to reel off comments made by Labour ministers in the past criticising such a move, including Finance Minister Grant Robertson.
Quote, other countries with more exemptions will know it becomes an absolute boondoggle to get through. And what exactly did he mean by boondoggle?
Well, Mr Speaker, I'm very pleased that the word boondoggle is getting a run in Parliament. One of my favourite phrases. There are a few things that have been called boondoggles over the year that turned out all right. The Sydney Opera House was one of those, and the Hubble telescope, Mr Speaker.
The debate and the ducking and diving are creating a lot of heat, but are not shedding a lot of light on some of Labour's key plans in particular. Both parties are promising to release their tax and fiscal plans in the coming weeks, giving the public plenty of time, they insist, to run the numbers for themselves.
Jane Patterson, our political editor there, 27 minutes away from 6. Kia amo tonu mai. Do stay with us. You're listening to Checkpoint on RNZ National. It is time for the business news now. Ko taku hua I Naianei, ko Kim Moody, who joins us live. Kim, people under the age of 25 are feeling the financial pain the most from high interest rates and inflation. Tell us why that is.
Kia ora, Lisa. Yes, so we've had our monthly report out from the Credit Reporting Bureau, Centrix. They look at the number of people that are behind or in arrears with debt repayments. So first of all, overall, the debt arrears, people in arrears with debt, that's eased marginally to 11.4% of active borrowers being behind in their payments. That translates to about 414,000 people behind. And that has come down from the 4-year high of 426,000 that we saw in May. However, generally year on year, arrears have been rising in all age groups. So everyone's basically getting behind further on their debt that are in it. But the Centrix data showed that those under 25 are doing it the hardest, and those over the age of 50 are actually faring the best. So for the first time, the Bureau included an index showing how different age groups and of borrowers were faring basically compared to how they were in January 2020 in terms of financial stress levels. And those aged 18 to 24 have experienced the worst increase in stress based on how many are behind in their repayments. Now, again, by contrast, the loan arrears amongst people aged 40 or over had fallen and their stress levels were looking a bit lower. So when we talked to the Centrix Managing Director, Keith McLaughlin, he said, unfortunately for the younger age group, under the age of 24, it's just their time of life. You know, people at that age, I know I certainly was, you know, you're more likely to be at uni or maybe starting out in your career. Or working a part-time job, perhaps, you know, not very senior, your pay is probably quite low. If you're a uni student, certainly you'll be struggling with those higher living costs while you're trying to study. He says it's not because young people are more irresponsible, spending their money carelessly. He said younger people tend to have lower incomes. They're also at a greater risk of being unemployed or perhaps being the first to go if there are layoffs there. So there are a lot of factors there that are coming into play. So if we are looking for good news, which I always am, As I said, remaining up year on year. There have been some improvements in credit arrears and what we're seeing kind of month and month across major categories. So things like personal loans, buy now, pay later products and credit cards and vehicle loans. People seem to be managing their debt a little bit better. So that is a good sign considering, we might see high living costs for a few more months yet.
And Kim, a $225 million cash injection for Kiwi Bank. It's a bit of a money go-round. Explain it to us.
It is. So the bank's state-owned holding company is giving money back to the bank. It's basically they have agreed to sell, or they've agreed that the proceeds, rather, of the sale of its former investment insurance businesses should go back to the bank. So the bank is getting $225 million. They say that's a vote of confidence and will make the banking sector more competitive. Now, Kiwi Bank is our 5th largest bank in the country, but it does trail, quite a lot behind the 4 major Australian-owned banks, both in terms of size and in market share. So when I spoke to the Kiwi Bank Chief Executive Steve Jurkovic today, he said, most of that money will be invested in the bank's technology systems, making things run smoothly for customers, things like that. He said it will help to make it more competitive. But, he said Kiwi Bank, he admitted it remains, a long way behind the big 4 banks, rather. But it is looking to grow. And he said, look, the big 4 won't be quaking in their boots hearing this, but it will help the bank to achieve its goals. And if we're talking about growth, he said, look, it's not going to come through money, it's going to come through customer service and on a customer-by-customer basis. And that's what we're focusing on now and in the long term. So for now, hopefully some better systems for the bank.
And we've got time for a quick sprint through the markets.
I will sprint through local top 50 index closing down 75 points or 0.6%. At 11,980, your dollar is buying 62 US cents, 92.7 Australian and 48.2 pence.
Thanks, Kim. Ka kite, Kim Moody there with Business News. The owner of a new vape store just metres from a West Auckland school says after meeting with the principal, he's agreed to change the name of the shop and has put film over the windows so kids can't see in. Members of the Parakai school community have protested outside the Vape Villa in Helensville this afternoon, concerned it will appeal to young kids. From October, a new law will prevent new stores setting up within 300 metres of schools or marae. The Helensville store is way closer than that. Store owner Hemant Jadhav explains why he chose that location.
Okay, first thing is, it is very close to my liquor store. Second thing is, that is the only shopping center in the town, very close, and third thing is, I got a permission from my landlord.
Can you tell me how far away you are from the school, please?
From school, I'm at the back door of the school because the school's front door is other side of the road. Not in the front of the building, it is at the back of the building.
But you are very close to the school.
You can say in one way, hardly any people go from here because most of them are staying that side.
What do you think of that? Is that a good idea, given the concerns about young people vaping and having access to these products? You are very close to the school, as you say, right by one of the entrances. Is that appropriate?
I think so because, see, I am not calling people to go and buy vape. I'm not putting any specials or anything and standing outside with the banner saying, come and grab it. So yes. Those who are adult, those who are having vape, they can only come.
You don't think it will still be a temptation and that young children will see people coming and going from the vape store?
No, I don't think so. If you tell about that, there are so many signboards of liquor and vape on the road in Auckland City. That doesn't say that it is tempting people.
Right, so you think there is already lots of signs advertising vapes, so it doesn't make much difference to have another store?
Yep.
Okay. Now, the principal of the school near you, she's a bit worried. Have you had any conversations with her?
Yeah, today morning I went with my landlord. We went to see her and yes, we talked to her. And I told my concerns that I will do these things to make you happy. Change the name of the store
So you're going to take the word vape out of the name of the store?
Correct. You're correct.
Okay. And what about advertising and windows looking into the shop?
Oh, no, there is a film on the window. The glass is covered with the film, so you can't see inside anything.
When did you get your licence to set up the vape store?
A month ago.
Right.
More than a month, I think.
Okay, because you would be aware, are you aware that the law is about to change and it would not be possible to set up a store within 300 metres of a school? Do you know that change is coming in very shortly?
When I applied for the license, that time I came to know, because my plan was, as I said, from 2021. And I got some quotations to modify the store well before 2022.
Right, so you had the plan for a while, but you didn't have the licence, and you've only had the licence for about a month. So, Hemant, did you move quickly so that you could get the licence before the change came in, given that you'd already chosen the premises?
No, not because of that, because the store was vacant just, I think, 2 months back.
What do you say to parents who are really worried that you're right across the road from their children's school?
Okay, as I said that I am into liquor business since last 4 or 5 years, and I'm aware of the rules and regulations not to serve, not to entertain under 18 people, and I'm sure that I will maintain the same thing.
And that is Hemant Jadhav, who owns the new vape store, which is opposite a school in Helensville. It is 17 minutes away from 6, and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. Do keep your feedback coming. Homai or Whakaaro, interested in your thoughts on vape stores and their locations near schools, or anything else you've heard on the program tonight. 2101 on text. Tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ, and the email address checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. Anna's standing by with the headlines. Ko Anna anō tēnei.
Thanks, Lisa. A West Auckland vape shop owner who's opened metres from a primary school's gate has told Checkpoint he's agreed to change the name of the shop and stop kids from seeing in, but Parakai School Principal Yolanda Koromansky says Hemant Jadhav's decision to open is disappointing and the rules need to change. Queenstown Airport says 4 flights were cancelled and another diverted to Christchurch amid today's wild weather. Winds gusting up to 130 kilometres an hour have downed power lines and taken the roof off a Tairi aerodrome building. Meanwhile, snow and ice is affecting several roads in the South Island, with the Milford Road remaining closed due to avalanche risk. A health and safety expert has told the District Court in Auckland that the danger of taking a tour on Whakaari White Island was second only to climbing Mount Cook. Richard Gibson said tours on Whakaari were often too risky to be commercially viable, something the island's owners deny. The Wellington Regional Council has been incorrectly collecting rates within Wellington City for 4 years, with homes and businesses being either overcharged or undercharged. It's because the Regional Council changed its rates 3 years ago but didn't explain properly to the Wellington City Council. And the United Nations says the death toll after 3 days of clashes in the biggest Palestinian refugee camp in Lebanon has risen to 11. More than 2,000 people have fled the camp and many buildings have been damaged, including 2 schools run by the UN Agency for Palestinian Refugees. Those are the headlines, Lisa.
Thank you, Anna. Let's get to some of your feedback now. I was engrossed in it when you came to a halt then. Particularly on the vape stores, you're getting in touch. Chris from Dunedin says the vape predicament was predicted, but regulators and general public not open to regulation. Now the horse is bolted and we're in damage control. Your current guest is bang on. That was in respect to Parakai School Principal Yolanda Koromansky. Someone else says both my teenagers started vaping at 12 years old until 16 years old. They did a technique called zeroing, which means they hold the puff in their lungs, so when they breathe out, nothing comes out. It is hard to detect. Cigarettes are easier to police, as teachers can smell the horrible smell, and kids won't be able to do it in class. Ban the vapes now, says Julian. This one too, vapes should not be anywhere near schools. On a completely different subject, damp houses and flats that don't pass the Healthy Homes test. This listener says, we've got twins at university who are renting 2 separate houses in Wellington, and it is disgusting how short of meeting the standards both their homes are. They are paying over $1,000 a week for 4 bedrooms in an original 1940s condition. We have tried endlessly to get the landlord to make these houses comply, but there's no account beyond a lengthy legal process. Wellington rents are exorbitant and the landlords must be made to comply with a minimum legal standard, says Vanessa. Keep it coming, 2101 on text, or you can tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ. A fleet of 17 bright blue electric buses have hit the road in Nelson and Tasman today. The launch of a new service designed to improve residents' access to public transport. It is a major overhaul that will see regular weekday services between Nelson and Motueka, as well as a dedicated airport bus from the city centre. Samantha G took a ride on one of the new electric buses.
At the Nelson City interchange, Bernie Habershaw is waiting to catch the Route 3 bus for the first time.
Yeah, I'm going to Edify there, is it?
Yep, that's it.
Yes, I'm going on Edify first time.
A daily bus user, she's been looking forward to the new service.
It's really exciting because having weekend buses, it's like gold. And the bus is going to be quiet, not going to be noisy. Only thing we're going to do is get the bus drivers to know our names again.
Today, the region's new public transport service has been launched. 17 electric buses, 100 new bus stops and 3 additional routes, including a 4-time daily express to Motueka. Joanna Santa Barbara was up early to catch the first bus out of Motueka shortly before 7 a.m.
Well, it was delightful. It was actually like being at a party because lots of people knew each other and we were kind of moving around the bus having lovely conversations with each other.
People of all ages had risen early to catch the first bus into Nelson.
It wasn't quite full, but near to. There were school children on it, and there were students going to the technical college, and I think other people who were sort of general commuters, as well as those of us who really want to see it happen and wanted to celebrate the occasion.
As the co-chair of the Nelson Tasman Climate Forum, Joanna Santa Barbara says the new service reflects the change it wants to see in the region.
I think we've got a long way to go. We definitely need to get out of our cars and onto buses, onto our bikes, into our walking shoes. And this means changing life habits, which is a little hard for many people, but we want to kind of cheer this change on.
Tasman Mayor Tim King says the new service is a game changer for those in the district's smaller, rural communities.
So the Wakefields, the Brightwaters, the Mapuas and out to a larger community like Motueka. So being able to access a regular, efficient service that's really cost competitive with other forms of transport means that there's just another great option for people to travel around our region.
Associate Transport Minister Damien O'Connor says Nelson and Tasman is a region long focused on sustainability and conservation.
Now the opportunity to support a bus service that's 80% electric will be a test of the community, and it will be more convenient to people to hop on and off, more frequent, which means that the opportunities are here. Uptake will be the big challenge, and I'm sure everyone here today will be enthusiastic about promoting it.
Nelson MP Rachel Boyack says the new service wouldn't have been possible without support from central government.
For a region like Nelson, we do have challenges around congestion, and one of the things people have said to me is they want to be able to use alternative forms of transport but haven't been able to do that. And so by offering a bus service of this kind alongside the investment we're making in walking and cycling, it means that it's easier for people to take alternative forms of transport, and that will help us to ease the congestion.
Bus travel remains free for under 13s and half price for those under the age of 25.
Political appetite for major transport projects in Auckland and Wellington has waned as pre-election jostling ramps up. National says it will bin plans for light rail in Auckland and the Let's Get Wellington Moving project. But Labor is now also being non-committal on work it's been progressing for the last few years. Crystal Gibbons reports.
In Wellington, residents are frustrated by political flip-flopping on a transport plan that's already been drawn out.
I'm not happy about it because I'd have liked the light rail. I understand that it's expensive, but it's only going to get more and more expensive if we don't do it sooner rather than later.
I'm not surprised. I think both parties have to play with something, and they're choosing this right now.
It has just seemingly dragged on for so long, and I think a lot of people just want to see some action now, and I think there's a bit of fatigue out there. There are a lot of public transport options, and it would just be nice to see some of them coming to fruition in the foreseeable future.
But Let's Get Wellington Moving also isn't inspiring people in its current form.
I think it would make sense to really go back to the drawing board and reevaluate all those old assumptions that I don't think hold up anymore.
Let's Get Wellington Moving seems to have taken quite a while to get moving, and perhaps there needs to be more communication about why.
Local business owner Nicola Cranfield hopes to see a second Mount Victoria tunnel remain as national as promising.
That would make a big difference to people's ability to move around Wellington, because we don't have a ring road. We need to go through the city, so I think that would make life for Wellingtonians much more straightforward.
While another resident isn't so keen on more roads.
All the evidence for the last 30 years or longer suggests that more roads just lead to more congestion.
Meanwhile, in Auckland, light rail could be on the way out, and residents' opinions are mixed.
I think it's a big mistake to not do the light rail project.
Could you tell me why?
Well, I think light rail is a very sensible way of moving people around.
The light rail probably wouldn't have been the be-all and end-all, but to have it all working together as a unit, it would have been a good sort of to help with the buses and to link it all together, I guess.
Putting it in, say, in a place like Dominion Road would be really, really tricky in terms of like the logistics of putting it in, the infrastructure you need to put in. It would cost a lot of money to get done. It's a real shame. I think that maybe if we'd thought about this maybe 30 or 40 years in the past, maybe this would have been, a lot of these things wouldn't be issues, but unfortunately we didn't future-proof ourselves.
But resident Lee Griffiths says current public transport options are also unreliable.
It would be nice if there was something that was continual and reliable. You either have the trains or the buses, something's always out.
The one thing residents in Wellington and Auckland are all in agreement about is that something needs to change.
It is 8 minutes away from 6. Kia mau tonu mai. Do stay with us. You're listening to Checkpoint on RNZ National. Now, picture this, a modified 1978 Land Cruiser driven by divers almost 8 kilometres along the ocean floor in Darwin Harbour in a record-breaking undersea adventure. Dubbed the Mud Crab, it took the cruiser 12 hours to go the distance, a few driver shift changes and a virtual gang of engineers and car geeks to make it happen. It was a do-over of a 1983 experiment of a similar ilk, and in spite of all the hiccups and workarounds, this attempt went swimmingly well. And joining me now from Sydney is one of the men behind the idea, Tom Lawrence. Hello, Tom. The first and most pressing question is why?
Hey, Lisa, how you going? Yeah, why? I think I found myself asking that question a lot over the last couple of months. It was definitely one of those things. It was a lot harder than we had anticipated. So why? The truth behind it, though, is the reason we did it is I'm a TV producer by trade, and I make a show for the Discovery Channel with a couple of the other guys who built the car. And we finished off doing a particularly long series last year and said, let's do a passion project. And we all had a mutual passion for Toyotas and Land Cruisers in particular. And we sort of thought, well, what would it take to make a really interesting documentary about a car that everyone would be interested in? And we thought we need to do something kind of big and interesting and out of the box to keep people interested. And I'd grown up around the corner from the guy who attempted the original crossing in 83. And it was sort of rattling around the back of my mind, and I pitched it to the boys and they said, no way. And then about a week later called up and said, yeah, let's go.
So, Tom, how complicated is it to convert a 1978 Land Cruiser to basically some kind of submarine-y car?
Turns out it's way more complicated than what we thought it would be. So what we had to do is we essentially did 3 different builds. We had to restore an old car that we bought for nothing, really. We got it really cheap because it was super rusty. So we had to restore that to the stage it was capable of holding all of our new systems. Then we had to do an electric conversion. So we did the restoration, the conversion, and then we had to marinize the vehicle so that it could be waterproof below. We went down to 30 metres, so it's quite serious amount of water pressure pressing on the whole system. So we ended up doing 3 builds simultaneously just to do it.
So you guys then, yes, an enormous amount of pressure on the Land Cruiser, but you as divers were driving this thing along the bottom of the harbour, which I can't quite get my head around. But what about you? Is that why you had to swap shifts with the drivers?
We didn't have a roof on it, so it wasn't like a little submarine that you climbed in and out of with the door and you could talk to each other inside. Everyone was on either scuba or surface supply air, where they have like a yellow helmet called a Kirby Morgan. And we had to swap shifts because we didn't want anyone to get the bends. If you're underwater for extended periods at depth, you can get you can get really sick from that. So we had to swap the divers in and out. Average drive was about sort of 15 to 20 minutes long, depending on how deep the diver was down there for.
So we're almost out of time, but I need to know, what is it like chugging along in a Land Cruiser at the bottom of the sea?
It's really hard to tell whether you're driving or not, because even if you stop, the tide could be going in and or out, and you think that you're moving because you've got all this water racing past you, like as though it's sort of wind. But then when you're actually moving, you might be going with it and it might feel like you're dead still. So when it's dark, the hardest thing is being able to tell whether you're moving or not.
So can you see anything? Because I understand there's crocs in them there waters.
The sharks ate all the crocodiles, so we're all right.
Well, that's good to know. Well done on your record attempt. Thank you for joining us. That is Tom Lawrence, an adventurer, an epic adventure, 1978 Land Cruiser, no land in sight, just chugging along the bottom of the ocean there. I mean, well, he explained the why, Anna. I still can't get my head around it.
Can I.
Okay, let's get to some of your feedback. Lots of it flooding in about the football. Who should we support now that the Ferns are not in the game? I don't know if I'm that happy with you. You're voting for supporting Australia. Well, it's actually a tie, so let's start with the ones who want to see Australia at the top of the table. We need to be supporting our co-hosts, Australia, you miserable sods. Okay, then. Someone else says, sorry, folks, Anzac tradition requires we back the Aussies. The exception is the Ashes, they reckon. Okay. This Kiwi is definitely backing our neighbours, the Aussie Matildas. Now our football Ferns are out. Hope Sam Kerr can show her class on the field, says Greg. Australia, after last week's rugby, they need a win. Really? We could just finish them off across the board. So that is equal with support for Japan. Japan, brave, bold and brilliant versus the more favoured Spain last night. This other person says Japan, no Asia team has ever won this tournament, but Japan have the team to win. Other people like the game the other night, say they're brilliant. They play exquisitely, says another person. Their finishing yesterday was awesome. And this in from a listener, I am a dual NZ USA citizen, but I'm supporting Japan. My Japanese daughter-in-law and Kiwi-born grandson have become soccer mad. The grandson is 6 and he's already a terrific player. Maybe the Japanese community in Dunedin and the rest of New Zealand could create a fine future for New Zealand soccer. You don't have to be built like an All Black Ford to excel in soccer. Another person says, I'll cheer for Oz now. My daughter lives in Sydney, would have preferred New Zealand, but never mind. Others say not the Spanish. Say the people of Palmy. Yeah, you've probably got a point there. Not watching the football anymore, says another listener. Netball World Cup is, where is it at? Got to be the Netherlands. Yeah, I tautoko that. Got them in the sweepstake. Not biased at all. Nicest people in the world, good banter and great, what does that say? Partiers, great partiers. Okay, that's a reason to support them. Anna, what team are you supporting now that the footy Ferns are out?
I have to say Australia.
Oh, get out of here.
Yep. RNZ News at 6 o'clock. Good evening, I'm Anna Thomas. It will be a particularly cold night in parts of the south as a southerly blast makes its way up the South Island. Winds gusting up to 130 kilometres an hour have downed power lines, cutting electricity to hundreds of people throughout the day. Waka Kotahi's highway maintenance teams are de-icing and gritting the central Otago roading network and are on standby to clear snow. Queenstown Airport says 4 flights have been cancelled and 1 has been been diverted to Christchurch. Met Service has issued road snowfall warnings for the Lewis, Arthurs and Porters passes, the Dunedin to Waitati Highway and the Milford Road. The Crown's clinical witness in the Lauren Dickinson murder trial admits he overlooked adding the mother's thoughts of harming the children in his report. Mrs Dickinson has pleaded not guilty to murdering her 3 young daughters. Her defence team is arguing insanity and infanticide. During cross-examination in the High Court in Christchurch, forensic psychiatrist Eric Monasterio said he was informed by the defendant's husband Graham of her thoughts of harming the children. Dr Monasterio admitted to defence lawyer Anne Tui that he did not discuss it with Mrs Dickinson 3 days later when he should have. He told the court earlier that he believed there was no evidence of an insanity or infanticide defence. Prime Minister Chris Hipkins and Christopher Luxon have clashed in the House over how National will fund its policies. Labor claims there's a $10 billion hole in National's transport policy, but National says the accusations are nothing more than a hit job. The spat spilled into question time this afternoon, with Mr Luxon asking Mr Hipkins why Labor is yet to announce its election policy. Mr Hipkins told him that the government is focused on ensuring its policy is properly funded.
Something the National Party still don't seem to be able to do. I would note, Mr Speaker, that in July 2017 the Labor Party released a comprehensive fiscal plan ahead of the general election, and yet it's now August, nothing but crickets from the National Party.
National is promising to release its fully costed fiscal plan well in advance of the election. Police in Taranaki say a number of people have overdosed on what is suspected to be the Class B controlled drug GHB or GBL, commonly referred to as WAS. They say the overdoses have resulted in admissions to Taranaki-based hospital. Health officials say anyone who has taken the drug and notices symptoms including loss of consciousness, seizures, increased heart rate, high blood pressure or strange feeling muscles should go to the emergency department. Possession of Class B controlled drugs is an offence. A former Queensland childcare worker has been charged with sexually assaulting more than 90 children. The alleged offences occurred between 2007 and 2022. It's alleged the 45-year-old man recorded his offending while working at 10 child care centres in Brisbane, 1 in Sydney and 1 overseas. Queensland Police Acting Assistant Commissioner Cole Briggs says the accused is facing more than 1,600 charges.
It is our priority to ensure that we maintain the integrity of court proceedings and to bring justice for the children and their families. This is horrific and extensive alleged offending, and I know this will have an impact on all Queenslanders and Australians.
The Privacy Commissioner says his office was forced to contact police to remind them of their legal obligation to disclose a recent data breach. The Firearms Authority sent nearly 150 firearms owners an email that failed to hide addresses of other recipients last week. Michael Webster says the Commission must be alerted to any breach that can cause serious harm to an individual.
I'm encouraged that they have already put in place a pause on all emails to groups while they put some technology-based guardrails in place. They have committed to doing that, and we'll be following up to see that they have actually done that in a timely and effective way.
Michael Webster says it was not good enough for police to downplay the matter as human error. Auckland homeowners will start receiving their rates bills this week, showing the biggest annual increase in over a decade. Rates are rising 7.7%. Auckland Council estimates the increase will cost an extra $253 a year, nearly $5 a week for the average home. It comes as homeowners owe the council $75 million in outstanding rates, and nearly 600 households are on a rates postponement arrangement. The amount of rates arrears dropped by $10 million compared with the previous year. Meanwhile, the owners of hundreds of flood-damaged homes will not pay any rates this financial year after council agreed to wipe their bills. A new electric bus service has been launched in Nelson and Tasman today, with additional routes and stops designed to improve access to public transport. Co-chair of the Nelson Tasman Climate Forum, Joanna Santa Barbara, was on the first bus from Motueka to Nelson early this morning. She says the new service reflects the change her group wants to see in the region.
I think we've got a long way to go. We definitely need to get out of our cars and onto buses, onto our bikes, into our walking shoes. And this means changing life habits, which is a little hard for many people, but we want to kind of cheer this change on.
The new service includes regular weekday buses between Nelson and Motueka and a dedicated airport bus from the city centre. Vanuatu's Prime Minister has told the country's rugby players to avoid consuming too much kava. Ismail Kalsakal made the comments during an end-of-season speech for the domestic rugby competition. He also told the rugby players that they need to raise the standard of play. Vanuatu is currently ranked 108th according to World Rugby. And that's the news.
Mis and disinformation is a big problem.
This impacts people in their real lives.
I'm Susie Ferguson, the creator of Undercurrent, an RNZ documentary series on misinformation. We examine the scale of the problem and tease out some ideas for addressing it.
But at the moment, they're so slanted in this us versus them rhetoric and not also giving each other the grace to be able to come back from that hardline argument.
Listen now to every episode at rnz.co.nz/undercurrent or wherever you get your podcasts.
Now the short forecast from Met Service until midnight tomorrow. Warnings and watches are in force for severe gales, heavy rain and snow. So Northland to Wellington, also Coromandel Peninsula, Bay of Plenty in the central high country. Showers, some heavy tomorrow with possible thunderstorms and hail and snow lowering to 700 metres. Gisborne, Hawke's Bay and Wairarapa. Showers spreading north tomorrow, some heavy with possible thunderstorms near the coast. Nelson, Marlborough and Canterbury, a period of rain spreading north, isolated showers tomorrow with snow to 500 metres for a time. Buller and Westland, rain heavy at times with possible thunderstorms and snow to 700 metres, clearing tomorrow. Otago, Southland and Fiordland, showers heavy, possibly thundery at times with snow lowering to 200 metres overnight. And for the Chatham Islands, fine spells, but showers tomorrow, some heavy and possibly thundery. RNZ National, it is coming up to 8 minutes past 6 and you're with Checkpoint and Lisa Owen.
Kia ora rā, e hoa. Pretty gnarly weather forecast. No mai, hoki mai. This is Checkpoint. Ko Lisa Owen tēnei. There are currently gale or storm warnings across the entire coast of New Zealand, and some very strong winds are blowing inland too, with Met Service issuing severe weather warnings for several parts of the country. Well, joining me now is Met Service meteorologist John Law. Kia ora, John. What is it like offshore?
Kia ora, Lisa. Yeah, it is a very windy story, not just offshore. We've got those storm warnings down and across those coastal areas south of the country, but for all the coastal regions around New Zealand, we have got those gale force warnings in place. So if you're heading off towards the marine areas, it's definitely worth having two thoughts about that. But like you say, it's not just those coastal areas that have seen those winds or are going to see those winds as we head through the night time tonight. We've got strong wind warnings across many parts of New Zealand, mainly across the south side, but as we head through towards tomorrow, up on towards the North Island as well.
So what kind of speeds are you talking about?
So the strongest winds we'll find over the Gland, we're looking at places like Southland and Otago. We could find winds reaching severe gale in the most exposed areas and gusts of wind around about 120, perhaps even 130 kilometres an hour in those areas there. Similar kind of values around Dunedin, even up through the Canterbury High Country, parts of Marlborough, and even towards Wellington and southern Wairarapa as well. So well worth keeping an eye on those forecasts.
What about the snow situation?
Oh gosh, it seems like August has arrived and so has winter properly down in the south. We'll find as we go through the night time tonight, that snow level really dropping down. So worth bearing in mind for those higher passes as we go in through the night time. But we are going to find that snow level dropping down even to around about 1 or perhaps 200 metres through parts of, say, Southland and Otago for those early hours of Wednesday morning. So a real wintry feel tomorrow, strong winds, cold air and even some snowfall. So well worth keeping that in mind. Might even find a few flurries around the top of that Dunedin highway, perhaps say Highway 1.
Hey, so John, is this just winter or is it a little bit out of the ordinary?
I think we've been dominated by northwesterlies over the last few months or so. So we've had a lot of very mild air across us and a lot of very wet weather across the North Island. This is a fairly classic cold southerly running up from the Southern Ocean, running across New Zealand, bringing some strong winds, northwesterlies ahead of it, then that cold southerly kicking in behind it. So not unusual, but hopefully fairly short-lived. It does start to pull away as we head through the next couple of days.
Right, so get out the big socks and the hottie.
Oh, definitely. I think wise advice.
Thank you, John. Appreciate your time. That is John Law from Met Service there. It's going to be a gnarly one overnight in some parts of the country. 6:10 and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. The football ferns might be out of the FIFA Women's World Cup, but the Matildas are keeping our co-hosting hopes alive after securing a sweeping 4-0 victory against Olympic champions Canada. The standout player of the night's match in Melbourne and the name on everyone's lips across Australia today is Hayley Raso. If you missed the game, Raso, who has come under fire on social media for the trademark ribbon in her hair, scored twice in the first half, ensuring the co-hosts a spot in the round of 16. The ABC's Fatima Ulimi reports.
Welcome to Nam. It's Australia against Canada here tonight.
It was a do-or-die match for the Matildas, and barely 9 minutes in, it was a goal by Hayley Raso that put Australia out in front.
Raso takes a touch on the right foot, shoots, scores! Hayley Raso's put Australia in front.
Her goal was paid after a score review.
The goal stands. There is no offside.
But the early lead by no means kept the Matildas satisfied, with Raso netting yet another goal in the first half.
Drops down in front of goal, it's turned her again! Australia have got another goal!
In the second half, Mary Fowler scored.
Pulls it back, Fowler's there! Hits the post and in! Fowler's got a third!
And in the final minutes of the game, Captain Steph Catley converted a penalty to put Australia 4 clear of Canada.
Strikes it beautifully. She sent Australia into
the Matildas' victory does exactly what all the home team's fans hoped for, keeping them in the tournament and giving their best forward, Sam Kerr, who was benched last night, the time to recuperate after her calf injury. Kate Gill is a former Matildas captain. She's also the co-chief executive of Professional Footballers Australia.
We know we have quality players all over the pitch, and I think it proved last night that if Sam is on the pitch, we look like a great side, and even without her, we do exactly the same.
And it's the strength of the team as a whole that's impressed observers as the Matildas prepare for their next matchup. Raso, with 2 goals last night, has been a player to watch for quite some time. She started her football career training on Queensland's Gold Coast, playing as a junior at the Palm Beach Soccer Club. Jessica Rose is the club's women's committee co-chair.
Last night we had the 2 under-15s girls teams there watching. It was a really cool experience for them to see someone out there at that high level with such a big crowd doing really important things for our position in this World Cup.
Raso isn't the only notable player to come from the club. Alumni include her teammate Ivy Lewick, as well as Socceroo Kai Rowles.
We're improving every year, but I think importantly it really comes down to fostering a love of the game at a young age, really enjoying it so that it has the longevity for those girls and other young players to get to an international stage.
After Palm Beach, Raso went on to play for Aussie teams Canberra United and Brisbane Roar before heading overseas to the US. While representing the Portland Thorns in 2018, Raso experienced a major setback, fracturing 3 vertebrae in her back in an on-field collision.
She punched it in, and again it is Raso down on the ground.
The injury at the time left Raso unsure if she would ever walk again.
I was just thinking, I've been hit in the back, and does that mean I'll play again? Does that mean I'll be able to walk? And then I remember some people being around, and then my athletic trainer came onto the field and she was asking me, can you feel your legs? Can you wiggle your toes? But I couldn't do anything at that moment.
After extensive rehab, Raso returned just 6 months later at the 2019 Cup of Nations, where she scored in her return match against New Zealand.
Raso. Hayley Raso! What a return! She's only been out there for
And after spending the last 3 seasons in England, including a 2-year deal with Manchester City, the 28-year-old will become the first Australian to play for Spanish giants Real Madrid. But there's arguably a bigger challenge before that. With the Matildas now through to the round of 16, Raso's focus, along with her teammates, will be on winning the World Cup for Australia. After last night, they'll go against the runner-up of Group D, setting them up for a Monday night face-off with Denmark, China or England.
And sticking with Australia, Australia's natural wonder, the Great Barrier Reef, has been granted a reprieve on being labelled as in danger. A United Nations body has delayed a decision on its World Heritage status. However, despite positive steps taken to protect the health of the reef in the past 12 months, UNESCO found climate change and pollution still pose a serious threat to the world's largest coral reef system. The ABC's Bridget Fitzgerald reports.
While it won't technically be classed as in danger just yet, the Great Barrier Reef remains under serious threat.
I think it's a really big wake-up call for us here in Australia to do all of our efforts possible to stop what we anticipate will happen in the coming months with summer.
Jodie Rummer is a professor of marine biology at James Cook University. In a report released overnight, UNESCO's recommended that a decision to place the Great Barrier Reef on a list of in danger World Heritage sites should be delayed. The report found the Australian government had taken measures to protect the reef in recent months. In particular, UNESCO highlighted Australia's progress on climate change policy, including its commitment to limit emissions.
We know that is the one single most profound action we can do to give the Great Barrier Reef the best fighting chance for survival. And what we have been doing over the past year will make a difference, but we need to double down on that. We need to not be approving any more coal, oil, or gas projects. And that needs to start now.
The World Heritage in Danger list identifies sites that are under threat of losing the unique qualities that earned them World Heritage status in the first place. Once a site's on the list, it could end up being stripped of World Heritage status entirely. While the decision's been deferred, the world's largest coral reef system isn't out of the woods just yet.
It's important to remember that the government has a lot of work still to do if they want to actually protect the future of the Great Barrier Reef.
Dr. Lisa Schindler is the Great Barrier Reef campaign manager for the Australian Marine Conservation Society.
They still have a long way to go in terms of actually implementing climate policies that are in line with 1.5 degrees. Right now, the Australian government's policy is in line with about 2 degrees, which would see about the loss of about 99% of coral reef. And they have a long way to go. So within the draft decision of UNESCO last night, they expressed a serious concern the lack of progress in addressing water quality. And that has been a concern of UNESCO for about a decade, and the government is just not working quickly enough to address that threat.
Professor Jodie Rummer says with the Northern Hemisphere experiencing extreme and record-breaking heat waves, Australia needs to consider what it can do to protect the reef ahead of summer.
So as the World Meteorological Organization, as NOAA, have both declared an El Nino cycle already. We're looking at our own Bureau of Meteorology declaring an El Nino soon. That's a big warning for us coming into our summer months with an El Nino on the brink, and what we can be doing to increase that awareness that the reef is very much in danger.
But she's confident the health of the reef can be improved.
We as Australians, we as community here in Queensland, those of us that rely on a healthy Great Barrier Reef, healthy coral reef ecosystems and marine ecosystems worldwide, we can set that example right here in Australia, that if we can do it, so can the rest of the world.
Australia must report further progress on its protection of the Great Barrier Reef to UNESCO by February 2024.
Ukrainian forces have been praised by their president for their advances around the city of Bakhmut in the east of the country. Russia captured Bakhmut earlier this year after almost 12 months of intense fighting. The BBC's Jonathan Beale joined with a team of elite snipers known as the Ghosts of Bakhmut.
We're on our way to a secret location, a place they call the edge of existence. Behind the wheel, the man simply known as Ghost. He tells me his team of snipers are all known as the Ghosts of Bakhmut because they silently bring death. Their base is already well within range of Russian artillery. That was close. But they'll be going even closer towards enemy lines.
You can hide from artillery, but not from snipers.
And their work is more precise than the shelling. Do you know how many Russians your team have killed?
Yes, the confirmed number is 524. 76 of those are mine.
The ghosts have been operating on the edges of Bakhmut for the past 6 months, often looking for high-value Russian targets. They record every kill through their sights. Kuzia will be the marksman for tonight's mission. Before the war, he worked in a factory.
When I was a civilian, I didn't like weapons. But now I've had to take up arms to defend my country. Of course I'm scared. Only a fool wouldn't be.
A quick blessing. We leave with dusk approaching. The music to lift the mood and mask the sound of artillery. Several times the driver, Kucht, warns incoming. They wear British-supplied uniforms. The insertion of the team can often be the most dangerous part of the mission. From here, they'll have to walk another mile to reach their target. And that's a big explosion. Now the anxious wait for the team's return. 7 hours later, the two-man team are extracted. Early morning, just before the shelling resumes. The relief is palpable. Kuzia, the sniper, says the mission was a success. Just one shot. One shot, one target, he says. The commander, Ghost, is just relieved they're safe.
Every trip could be our last, but we are doing a noble deed.
It's also part of Ukraine's psychological warfare. Killing from a place that can't be seen and with a sound that can't be heard.
To some of your feedback now, you've been getting in touch about damp houses and healthy homes. And this person says our Parnell landlord said he wasn't going to bother with healthy homes in 2021 as he wanted the house to deteriorate so he could pull it down and build units. He made no effort to fix leaks or address increasingly serious mould problems. We moved out as soon as we could. A listener in Northland's got in touch to say they've just had their old house insulated by healthy homes. No charge to bring it up to standard as we are in a low-income postcode, they say. We paid to have a super efficient team put in a ground barrier as well. Couldn't be happier with every aspect of what was done, and the house is warmer and drier immediately. Another listener says, my rental apartment is healthy home compliant. My home is not. I can't afford to insulate, but it's not acceptable for a rental to not be up to standard. If landlords such as myself are relying on tenants to pay our mortgages, we must provide safe and warm homes. Infectious diseases experts say a ban of dog and cat meat at Indonesia's most notorious wet market should be extended to bats. The ban comes after years of pressure from animal rights groups, but the trade in bats continues. Here's the ABC's Bill Birtles, and just a warning, there are some confronting descriptions.
Deep into the meat section of a wet market in North Sulawesi, vendor Ravana Mariska is blow-torching a dead bat. Burning off its fur, she's preparing dozens of bats for the dining table.
We burn them first, then we chop them up, then we boil them. We cook them with coconut milk so they'll be delicious, in a thick, sweet broth.
She's one of about half a dozen bat sellers who poke a skewer through each bat and pile them up on tables awaiting buyers.
People in Manado eat bats because they taste delicious. It's part of the culinary experience here. It's rare to find this anywhere else.
It's not lost on the vendors here that the COVID pandemic that started in China and killed millions of people around the world is believed to be bat-related. The The sale of bats stopped for a few months when the pandemic began, but it's thriving again. But bats are now in focus because of the other animals on sale here. Dogs, cats, wild boar, pythons and rats are all available in northern Sulawesi at wet markets. But the local government in charge of the region's most famous market in the hill town of Tomohon has just banned dog and cat meat. The deputy mayor is Edwin Rorong.
It's tradition here for people to eat dogs and cats. There was some pushback from the sellers who felt we were ruining their livelihoods, but we continued with the push to ban it, and it means we now have an effective tool to help control rabies.
Rabies, though, is only one threat, according to veterinary pathologist August Setiono of Indonesia's IPB University.
Bats contain dangerous pathogens, so there needs to be very careful handling and processing to minimize exposure, which is not always the case.
He thinks the bat trade poses a real risk that Indonesia could harbour the next viral pandemic.
I can't say it's a time bomb, but the fact is wild animals like bats carry zoonotic diseases. So we're just waiting for another pandemic to happen again.
Back at the markets in northern Sulawesi, local health officials aren't worried. They say every 3 months, staff take meat samples from the market to a lab to test for pathogens. The government has no immediate plans to extend the ban on dog and cat meat to bats or to any of the other exotic animals available to eat here, meaning the trade in this unusual northern Sulawesi delicacy will continue.
And finally tonight, let's go to the United States, where a Kansas farmer will celebrate his golden wedding anniversary by giving his wife more than just your average bouquet. Abby Ray with the story of 1.2 million flowers.
Sunflowers. As far as the eye can see, one couple's love story leads them to a field of flowers. Lee Wilson decided to farm a different kind of crop than he usually does this season for a very special reason.
So we're celebrating our 50th wedding anniversary, August 10th, and what's a guy get his gal on their 50th? And I put a lot of thought into it, and she always liked sunflowers, and I thought this is the year to plant sunflowers. So we planted her 80 acres of sunflowers.
Just how many sunflowers is that exactly?
There's about 1.2 million flowers in this field.
That's 15,000 flowers per acre. Lee planted the field back in May secretly with the help of his son, so his wife Renee would be surprised.
It made me feel very special, and it couldn't have been a more perfect anniversary gift than a field of sunflowers.
The pair has been together almost their entire lives.
But we met in high school. She couldn't date till she was 16, and I called her on her 16th birthday, and that's when we started dating. And we had our first date was a roller skating party, an FFA roller skating party in Harper, Kansas.
When did you know she was the one?
Probably that day.
The new Pratt sunflower field has drawn in people from all over Kansas to take pictures and experience the state flower in full bloom. Do the Wilsons plan on making this a tradition?
Oh, it's been fun, but I think that one time is enough for us. It's somebody else's turn next year.
The field can be seen 4 miles east of Pratt on the south side of Highway 54.
And how gorgeous is that? 1.2 million sunflowers. Amazing. Before we go, some of your feedback, lots of it in on vape stores. This person says our expat Kiwi family are visiting from Singapore. I had to explain to them what vaping was. It's illegal in Singapore. They don't have any vaping at all, let alone 9-year-old kids. Boy, did we miss the boat on this one. How we ever thought that allowing vaping was a good idea right when our smoking rates were dropping out of sight is beyond me. Having 3 teenagers, none of their friends smoke, but they all vape. We are trying to shut the stable door after the horses bolted. There is a whole new generation of new nicotine addicts out there. This person says if vapes are visible, kids want a taste. If vapes are hidden behind frosted glass, kids get curious and they want to try them. Lose for our kids. Caroline, though, says the man who owns the store seems to be going about his lawful business and is doing as much as he can to mitigate the perceived damage to the community. That is about all we've got time for this evening. Thank you so much for all your feedback. If you missed anything, you can check us out again on Spotify, Apple or wherever you get podcasts from. Ko te kaupapa tuatahi e pōpō tomorrow from 5 a.m. a.m. First up's got the latest on the wintry weather with Philip Duncan from Weather Watch, and Greens co-leader Marama Davidson talks transport. Get your skates on for that one, 5 a.m. tomorrow morning.
And now the 6:30 headlines. The Crown's clinical witness in the Lauren Dickerson murder trial has told a court that her husband informed him of her thoughts of harming their 3 children. But forensic psychiatrist Eric Monasterio admits he did not discuss this with Mrs Dickerson, who denies murder. Labour and National are at odds over transport, with National denying there's a $10 billion hole in its policy. Typhoon Doksuri is continuing to batter northern China, leaving at least 11 people dead and 27 missing in Beijing, with tens of thousands forced to flee their homes. And transport agency Waka Kotahi is urging drivers to take care overnight as a fast-moving southerly front continues to make its way up the South Island. Road snowfall warnings are in place for the Lewis, Arthurs and Portis passes, the Dunedin to Waitati Highway and the Milford Road. Those are the headlines. Our next news and weather is at 7.
Tomorrow on Afternoons with Jesse Mulligan, it's a silent and effective killer and by far the most dangerous impact of climate change. Heat kills more people than drought or wildfires, and it's only going to get worse, says Jeff Goodall, who's been writing about climate change for more than a decade. As many parts of the world continue to swelter, he talks to me about the risks we face as our planet gets hotter and what we need to do to cool off this deadly trend. That's from 1 p.m. tomorrow on RNZ National.
Kia ora, you're listening to Trending Now, and on the detail this evening, thinking about booking that long-awaited overseas trip? Well, international travel is back and bigger than ever.
Kiwis are jetting away overseas again, according to some of our largest travel agents.
Whether it's reconnecting families, cruise ship sailings or Disneyland trips, demand is up across the board.
And if social media feeds are anything to go by, plenty of people have swapped the depths of New Zealand winter for Greek beaches, European landmarks and Southeast Asian food adventures. Travel is back and bigger than ever.
There are twice the demand for international travel and domestic travel than there was before COVID.
We are just doing week after week, month after month of record sales, and that is just a reflection that people are wanting to travel.
Kia ora, I'm Tom Kitchen, and today on The Detail, how has the travel industry managed to bounce back after the dark years of the pandemic? And why are so many of us opting to jet overseas? Are we chasing the sun or just making up for lost time?
The demand for travel, which came back very strongly when borders opened, just hasn't seemed to have eased at all.
Grant Bradley is the aviation writer for the New Zealand Herald.
At the start, it was very much catching up with friends and relatives who you hadn't seen for 2 or 3 years. But as time has gone on, you've seen that big return of leisure travel and also corporate travel. There were fears during the pandemic that business travel might be over, but there's no evidence of that. The corporates are travelling in big numbers again.
Is it also I want to get somewhere away on holiday, I want to chase the sun?
Yes, certainly from a New Zealand winter this year, and New Zealand summer for that matter, but this revenge travel is a thing.
What do you mean by revenge travel?
They call it revenge tourism. Travel with a vengeance to get back at 2 years of pandemic.
People who were deprived of their annual trip overseas during the pandemic when borders were closed, taking revenge and getting out there in big numbers.
But if you've checked out airfares recently, you might have noticed they're a lot higher than they were before the pandemic. And there just aren't as many flights or airlines as there used to be.
Over the last 18 months or so, they've skyrocketed. They've gone through the roof. In the 12 months to March, in New Zealand, anyway, international fares were up around about 17%. In the latest quarter, there's some good news for consumers. They seem to have come back a little, so for that 3 months, down 12%. It's going to be interesting to see whether that's a long-term trend. What you're seeing with airlines is that they're making record or near record profits. That's as a result of their yields being very strong. And that translates to people paying big airfares. And looking ahead with analyst forecasts, there's no sign of that easing.
Yeah, well, one example you do have is Air New Zealand.
That's right. It'll be a near $1 billion turnaround for Air New Zealand. So they're looking at a pre-tax profit of around about $580 million when they announce their result on August 24th. So that's a spectacular reversal of horrendous losses for a 2-year period. And that's a result of having fewer competitors in the market and being able to charge airfares which are a lot higher than what people were paying in 2019.
And why are they able to charge that much?
Well, the demand is there and the supply is short. Very, very simple economic equation.
So by the supply short, you mean there's just fewer flights available? Or?
Yeah, that's right. Well, Air New Zealand itself has got reduced capacity. They had to retire a number of their big long-haul planes. Their competitors, while they're coming back in numbers now, they haven't been able to spool up as quickly as they'd like to this market. They're concentrating on other, even more lucrative markets, but they're starting to come back in numbers, and you'll start to see a lot more competition across the Pacific to the United States, for example, over summer.
And more airlines are getting back on the runway?
That's right. Auckland Airport now has 23 airlines flying to 39 destinations. That's up 12 airlines and 21 destinations at the depths of the pandemic. It's still not the 30-plus carriers that they had in 2019, but they're getting there. And one important feature here will be the return of Chinese carriers. China Eastern, China Southern, and Cathay Pacific coming back over summer. So that means that flights to China and beyond will reduce in price.
And yes, the figures certainly show more people are travelling.
Stats New Zealand figures show the number of New Zealanders who have travelled overseas in May, for example, doubled to more than 200,000.
That's compared to the same month last year.
That's still not near the numbers that they were travelling before the pandemic, but folks have a lot more confidence about going back there into the world.
And more people are keen to leave.
There's a research agency, Angus and Associates, in Wellington that's been tracking data for leisure travel intentions in New Zealand and Australia for the last 3 years or so. A lot more Kiwis are eyeing overseas trips now than they were earlier in the year. So around about 3 out of every 10 New Zealanders surveyed say they're intending to travel overseas for leisure, so have a holiday in the next 6 months. So yeah, that exodus of people going away, whether it's for a fly and flop holiday in Fiji or further afield, that trend's certainly running strong and will continue.
Are there any of these airlines putting on any new exciting, say, routes around the world?
Look, there's an interesting new carrier coming in from Malaysia in August, Batik Air, not well known in New Zealand, and that's going to be a really interesting study of a startup here. It's flying Kuala Lumpur to Perth and then on to Auckland using a narrow-body Boeing MAX aircraft, and that's going to introduce some competition into that Auckland-Perth route. This is something Air New Zealand will be frowning at because this airline will be operating a fairly near-new plane and offering a brand-new product and hopefully lower prices.
It was a very, very difficult time. I've been in the industry 25 years and there's no doubt about it that going through COVID was our most difficult period ever.
This is Brent Thomas, Chief Operating Officer of House of Travel, New Zealand's largest independent travel agency. He's also the president of TANZ, the Travel Agents Association of New Zealand.
From our industry point of view, we went from around 5,000 people to around 2,000 people. So we had to lay off over 3,000 people. At House of Travel, we went from 1,200 staff to around 500 staff. And simply that's because as an income stream, overnight, we literally went from 100% of revenue to less than 10% of revenue. So, there was never an industry in New Zealand who got impacted more so than the travel sector, and particularly the outbound sector, because Domestic travel still continued to some degree, which helped some of the inbound players be able to keep operating. But from an outbound point of view, it literally stopped overnight.
Did you have to shut shops or anything like that?
Yeah, I mean, House of Travel, we went from about 80 stores to 60 stores, so not as many closures as you probably would think, but obviously within those stores, we actually, had to lay off staff, which is terribly hard because they're not staff, they're family. That's the way it feels like in our industry and in House of Travel in particular. And so having to lay off 700 staff was an incredibly difficult period.
How did you get through? Like, what was your business?
Oh, our business was trying to support local operators, so we did as much domestic as we possibly could. There was still corporate travel happening in and around New Zealand. There were stores who were obviously repatriating people back from overseas when they could get them through the windows in MIQ, which was obviously incredibly difficult. And then we also had people who took on other roles. So, we were assisting in things like the health line, etc. But ultimately it was, to get the business through that period, it was a significant cash burn and it just required a lot of capital to keep the staff on. And if you look at the forecast that we did, we were wildly out because we were far too optimistic in terms of the return of the business. But we did get through and we were able to retain 500 key staff to get us through on the other side. We're now well over 800 staff and it's great to be back and effectively booming because the travel industry is back well and truly on its feet and New Zealanders are travelling overseas again in significant numbers.
Well, good. Well, tell me about that boom. I mean, how does it compare to pre-pandemic?
We're running about 80 to 90% of our customers' numbers, but our dollar value is greater than 2019, and that is simply because the fares are still slightly higher now than they were in 2019 for some routes. As I say, some are coming down, but at this stage, the pricing generally is higher in 2023 than it was in 2019.
Okay, and where are the most popular destinations? Where do people want to go?
So Australia is always going to be our number one destination. 50% of all outbound travel from New Zealand goes to Australia. And then the next one, of course, is then the islands. And so between the two of them, they account for about 70% of the outbound travel. And that will always be the case.
Why is that?
Firstly, getting away from winter, it's an easy travel, 3 to 4 hours to those destinations. The pricing is good from that perspective, and it's just an ease of travel. So people are heading there in significant numbers, and we're seeing that come down with greater capacity now into the islands and into Australia. So someone like Qantas now has actually got greater capacity on the Tasman than they had in 2019, which is good. The issue we don't have is that the customer faces, we don't have enough carriers on the Tasman at this stage. We need more competition to get that pricing point, which is ultimately what drives even more demand. But outside of that, the other destinations or things are Europe is still very large and people are travelling there in really good numbers for the 23 season. And the US, or North America actually, rather than just the US, is going to be very large in 23-24 because of these 8 carriers coming in with this increased capacity, with the likes of Delta, American, United Airlines, got Air Canada flying there, we've got Air Tikiti, Nui, Fiji Airways, and then of course Qantas near New Zealand fighting it out over the New York route.
Qantas wants its own slice of the Big Apple market, today starting a new direct flight on a major Air New Zealand route to New York. It marks the first time Qantas has flown from Auckland to an international destination outside Australia in more than 20 years.
So a lot of capacity going into North America. Fastest growing segment, though, in the market is cruise.
Hi, Mom. Kelly, Rita, and I just went on our Carnival cruise. Hey, look, that's me there in the middle. And we just really found ourselves, I got over my fear of bubbles. Rita took some time to reflect. We tried new things and new foods.
So people are buying more and more cruise than ever before. And what may surprise yourself and listeners is people are booking out to 2026 for their cruises now.
Wow,
if you're like me, you hardly know what you're doing in 2023, and some people are, booking out 3 years in advance. But yeah, cruise is definitely is the fastest growing part of the market, and that's because there are one, so many cruise lines, and two, they cater for so many different aspects. So whether it be couples or families or intergenerational travel, there's a cruise there for everybody, whether it be a river cruise in Europe or a sea cruise around the Mediterranean or into Alaska. There's just a myriad of choices.
So who is travelling? Is it more the business market? Is it families? People want to go in the OE?
So our fastest growing part of the market at House of Travel is actually the 25 to 40-year-olds. In fact, it's grown by 40%. So that's a significant increase in a segment of the market.
40% from when, sorry?
From 2019's numbers. So that's the last time we had what you'd call a normal year. So we base ourselves off the 2019 aspect, because you can't compare to 2022 because they were abnormal years for obvious reasons.
I'm at that age group myself.
Yeah, well, I think they recognise also that life is short and you want to go and have all these experiences because you never know what's around the corner.
Oh, you're tempting me, Brett. You're tempting me.
Yeah, well, there's 220 odd countries in the world. There's a lot to see out there, and New Zealand's got a lot to offer, but so we are still quite an isolated country, and there's a lot of other things to go and see and do. So that's one aspect. I think we also see that more mature part of the market also recognise that they've only got so much travelling left in them. And so they were a little bit more hesitant to travel in 2022, coming out of COVID. But we've seen the increase in bookings for 2023 and particularly going into 2024. So our growth market is going to be the more mature market in the next 12 months as well. So the young ones have come in, they recognise the value that a travel agent brings. The more hesitant or the more conservative people are now booking for their travel because they don't want to miss out. If you're 60 years of age, for argument's sake, you might have 20 to 30 years of good travel left in you. So is that going to be 20 or 30 trips overseas? When you start to break it down like that and you've got a bucket list, you soon go through those years pretty quickly. So,
are people more chasing the sun? Is it a bit of seasonal affective disorder, or is it?
Oh, most definitely. Most definitely. I mean, if you look at it, you have a week of grey weather and everyone starts to feel a bit depressed, and there's nothing like going and to Fiji, Rarotonga or something and having a 28-degree day and sunny weather, it just makes you feel better. And that's what I say from a health perspective and mental health perspective as well. It's great to go and see the sun. So, yeah, I mean, from an outbound travel point of view, the high season is May through to September, early October when people do travel. However, having said that, what we have noticed since the borders opened in February 2022 is that seasonality has gone out the window at the moment. People are just wanting to get away, and so a place like Fiji, where it might have been slower over the rainy season, actually didn't slow down hardly at all this year. People just still wanted to get up to Fiji, and so they would go in the summer months. And I think that's going to continue for probably another 12 months, where people are still in a bit of catch-up mode for their travel, and they want to just go in and get their experiences, catch up with family and friends, and they'll just go whenever it suits them rather than worrying about going at a particular time of year.
So is it pent-up demand, or are you seeing brand new high levels of travelling?
The pent-up demand is well and truly behind us. We're now in just business as usual type mode, but having said that, the business as usual type mode is greater than 2019. So we are just doing week after week, month after month of record sales, and that is just a reflection that people are wanting to travel and part to go and do it. So it's